Chapter 13. Eren swept an inconspicuous glance at the fallen crowd, then began removing the soundproof equipment strapped to his body, letting his hearing return to normal. Seeing this, Coulson and the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents followed suit, taking off their gear. Much better, Coulson said with a faint smile. He pointed to the old-fashioned record player behind Eren and asked, "So, does this mean the containment was successful?" Eren turned to look at the record player and nodded. "It's contained for now. However, my abilities are limited, so I can't guarantee how long the containment will last. If you want to avoid future incidents, I suggest constructing a completely soundproof space to store it." "A soundproof space, huh?" Noted. Coulson nodded thoughtfully, then cast a troubled glance at the hundreds of people lying lifelessly in the Morningstar bar. "And what about them?" Eren shrugged. "I'm no doctor. If you want to help them, you could try sending them to a hospital." Before he could finish, a soldier in tactical gear approached Coulson and whispered, "Sir, the people inside the bar, including the team that went in earlier, none of them have a pulse." The words struck like a thunderclap. Eren, Coulson, and the others froze. "They're all dead." Eren sighed internally. So even Uncle Yuan didn't make it. Uncle Yuan, who had tried to help him, had left a positive impression on Eren. This crisis was indirectly caused by Eren, and part of his reason for cooperating with S.H.I.E.L.D. was to try to save Yuan. But in the end, he still failed. After a moment of silence, Coulson personally went to check on the people in the bar. To his shock, he found that not only were they without a pulse, but their bodies were unnaturally cold and rigid. If he hadn't witnessed it himself, Coulson might have believed these people had been dead for days. "So this is what a forbidden item does," Coulson muttered grimly. In a single incident, over 100 casualties. If they hadn't acted quickly, the toll could have been even higher. Truly, a devil's relic. Eren, standing nearby, softly murmured, "The 1,000-year shift is upon us. The gears of fate have begun to turn. All that was hidden in history will soon resurface." Though Eren's voice was low, Coulson's sharp ears caught every word. Before Coulson could question him, Eren preemptively said, "So many people died here today. You've got your hands full, Agent Coulson. As for me, containing the forbidden item drained me. I need to rest." Without waiting for a response, Eren turned and left, his weary expression making it clear he had no intention of staying longer. Coulson hesitated. He wanted to stop Eren, to ask about what he'd just said. But the sight of the lifeless bodies sprawled across the bar pulled his attention back. Eren was right, there were more urgent matters at hand. Over an hour later, Eren finally managed to hail a taxi and relocated to a new place to stay. After carefully checking the room for any abnormalities, he took a deep breath and entered a meditative state. Moments later, Eren found himself once again in the space of the Scales of Fate. Standing before the scales, Eren summoned his personal fate panel. Name: Eren. Fate compass: 100 fate points required for one spin. Fate manifestation unlocks items from the River of Fate unlocked. Talent: unpredictable fate. Skills: driving, beginner, English 11th grade, history 11th grade, mathematics 11th grade, chemistry 11th grade, antique appraisal, novice, programming, advanced. Combat system: sequence 9, diviner. Strength evaluation: a novice with basic knowledge of the mystical arts. Fate points: 1000. The new section titled Combat System caught Eren's eye, likely a result of advancing to sequence 9 and consuming the diviner's potion. His strength evaluation had upgraded from complete amateur to novice, which wasn't much of an improvement. Moving on. Eren's gaze shifted to the 1000 fate points displayed on the panel. This was far more than the 100 fate points he'd started with as a newbie gift. With this amount, he could spin the fate compass 10 times. Additionally, the fate manifestation ability was now unlocked. However, after a brief review of the ability, Eren grimaced and dismissed it. Way too expensive. For instance, manifesting a simple Desert Eagle handgun cost 100 fate points. Advancing to the next potion, Clown, under the Diviner sequence. A whopping 2000 fate points. Compared to that, spinning the fate compass felt like a much better deal. What's more, Eren didn't urgently need the Clown potion, he had barely begun digesting the Diviner potion. A series of 10 spins seemed far more appealing. With that decision, Eren activated the fate compass. A massive ethereal image of the compass appeared before him, spinning rapidly. Click. As the compass needle stopped, a white orb of light materialized before Eren. Instead of checking the reward immediately, Eren continued spinning. 9 more times, he drained all his fate points. When the compass vanished, 10 glowing orbs hovered before him, 1 purple, 1 blue, 2 green, and 6 white. The colors likely indicated the rarity or quality of the rewards. With a mix of curiosity and anticipation, Eren reached for the purple orb. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Zaelum. Download app now. Chapter 14. With excitement building, Eren reached into the purple orb. Ding. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the Cosmic Brain Meditation Technique. Cosmic Brain Meditation Technique. What was this? Could it be from some mysterious wizarding world? Curious and eager, Eren crushed the purple orb. A burst of violet light enveloped him, and his consciousness seemed to enter another realm, one of knowledge and legacy. In this void-like space stood a serene middle-aged man. He stood as though teaching a student, his voice calm and deliberate as he addressed Eren. I will now pass on the pinnacle meditation technique of the universe, the Cosmic Brain Meditation Technique. Without unnecessary words, the man began demonstrating the practice. Sitting cross-legged, his posture was stable, one hand upright with the palm perfectly rounded, the other hand resting naturally, touching the void. Watching this serene posture, Eren immediately felt his mind settle. Fear, doubt, and intrusive thoughts vanished as his spirit calmed and clarity bloomed. The man's hand movements then began to change, sometimes blossoming like a lotus, sometimes forming fists, interlocking, or forming rings. The transitions were fluid and mesmerizing. My meditation diagram above represents the cosmic brain. Meditating upon it will enhance your mental strength, solidify your willpower, purify your soul, and guide you toward profound wisdom, he explained. The accompanying mind seal gestures will mobilize your mental energies, harmonize your physical cells, and unlock the latent potential of your body. Looking up, Eren saw a breathtaking starfield above the man's head. The vast cosmos seemed endless, containing billions of stars grouped into nebulae. At a distance, the nebula resembled the structure of a brain. Billions of stars formed glowing neural pathways, their movements akin to brain cells constantly firing. This was the meditation diagram of the cosmic brain. Eren was utterly captivated. As he marveled, the man continued demonstrating the intricate seals and gestures, their complexity burned into Eren's soul like vivid imprints. The man's words resonated deeply. The brain is will. Will is thought. Thought is spirit. Spirit is the soul. Meditate upon the cosmic brain, and your brain becomes the cosmic brain itself. Eren watched as the gestures and the massive nebula became deeply etched into his consciousness. When he finally emerged from the void, Eren found himself back in the scales of fate's space. The cosmic brain meditation technique was now firmly embedded in his mind, indelible. The gestures, the diagram, the vast cosmic nebula, all of it remained vividly clear. Just recalling it for a moment caused dizziness and a sharp headache. Eren stopped himself immediately. Though his face had gone pale, his smile was uncontainable. This is incredible. Compared to the beginner meditation technique that came with the diviner potion, the cosmic brain meditation technique was leagues more profound. It seemed to hail from a high-tech world, crafted by some supreme mental master. Its complementary mind seal gestures were among the most advanced techniques for hypnosis and mental manipulation. Once Eren mastered this meditation, he could quickly rise to become one of the world's top hypnotists. Beyond that, the meditation would rapidly enhance his mental strength, expand his intellectual capacity, and allow him to unlock the full potential of his physical body. Most importantly, its ability to purify his mind would help stave off the insanity that often plagued those who consumed mystical potions. This alone made the technique invaluable. Definitely worthy of being a purple tier reward, Eren said, brimming with satisfaction. After calming himself, Eren turned his attention to the remaining 9 orbs. Following the order of rarity, he reached into the blue orb next. Ding! Congratulations, host! You have obtained the sequence potion, clown. Eren froze for a moment. No way. Just earlier, he had been debating whether to save up another 1,000 fate points to manifest the clown potion through the new ability. Now, here it was, handed to him by the compass. What incredible luck! Spending just 100 fate points had netted him a potion worth 2,000 fate points. This alone made the entire draw immensely worthwhile. Good thing I didn't save up for that manifestation, what a waste that would have been. Having already scored the cosmic brain meditation technique and the clown potion, Eren was thrilled. Let's see if the rest of these are just as good. With growing anticipation, Eren crushed the remaining orbs all at once. Pop, pop, pop. When the light from the bursts faded, the results of his first 10 spins lay before him. In addition to the meditation technique and the potion, the 2 green tier orbs had produced. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 15. Aside from the cosmic brain meditation technique and the clown potion, the 2 green tier orbs produced a pink paper crane and a set of emerald green vials. Seeking paper crane, simply tell it the name of the person you wish to find, and the crane will lead you to them. Notes: the pink paper crane symbolizes a desire to spread its wings and fly toward a loved one. Limitations: the crane cannot locate deceased individuals. Don't expect a sentimental paper crane to traverse heaven or hell for the dead. Remaining uses: 3. Universal antidote can neutralize all ordinary toxins and most extraordinary ones. Notes: crafted by a master alchemist, this antidote contains near rule level power. A single dose cures any ailment. Quantity: 12 vials. The 6 white tier orbs yielded more mundane items. A crystal ball. A nutritionist's recipe handbook. A sharp dagger. An elegant clown mask. A grenade. A vial of hallucinogen spray. Compared to the first 4 items, these white tier rewards seemed lackluster. Most were simple, practical tools lacking any extraordinary properties. For instance, the crystal ball, dagger, clown mask, and grenade were all items one could purchase in the US. Spending 100 fate points on these items felt like a loss. Analyzing the rewards, Eren began to see a pattern in the fate compass's tiers. White tier orbs, common and practical, but not extraordinary. Useful tools, but often mundane. Green tier orbs, items imbued with extraordinary abilities, often unique or irreplaceable, though their uses may be limited. Blue tier orbs, rare and powerful objects that enhance the user, often granting supernatural capabilities. Purple tier orbs, exceptionally rare and potent, providing power with minimal risk or long-term advantages like transferable skills. Back in the scales of fate's space, Eren's mind churned as he examined his rewards. The clown potion was unnecessary for now. He still hadn't fully digested the diviner potion. Better to leave it in the scales of fate's space for safekeeping. The universal antidote was an immediate priority. Taking one vial for emergencies, Eren left the rest stored. The seeking paper crane would remain untouched for now. There was no urgent need for it. As for the other items, like the nutritionist's recipe handbook and crystal ball, they could wait until the current danger was resolved before being placed in his apartment. The dagger, clown mask, grenade, and hallucinogen spray, however, were perfect for self-defense and were immediately added to his gear. With that settled, Eren focused his mind, and the scales of fate's space dissolved around him. Eren's consciousness returned to his rented motel room. Compared to his previous experience, the transition was much smoother and faster this time. Could this be due to the diviner potion? Eren wondered. The enhanced spiritual strength and focus likely played a role. Making a mental note, he packed his new tools into his backpack before giving the room a final inspection. Once satisfied that everything was secure, Eren returned to the bed. Sitting cross-legged, Eren assumed the cosmic brain meditation pose from memory. With his hands forming intricate seals and his mind fixating on the vast neural cosmos, he began his meditation. As his fingers transitioned fluidly through the mind seal gestures, Eren's concentration sharpened. The visualization of the stellar brain intensified. His mental processes accelerated. It was as though every neural pathway in his brain fired simultaneously. Thoughts, connections, and solutions flowed at an extraordinary pace. If his brain had once processed dozens of computations per second, it now handled thousands, a tenfold increase. The deeper he delved into the meditation, the more his mental acuity grew. His thoughts became clearer, his perception sharper, and his will stronger. Suddenly, a sharp pain surged through Eren's head. His vision blurred, and he felt hot streams trickling from his nostrils. Stopping abruptly, Eren wiped his nose and found his hand stained with fresh blood. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 16. Is this nosebleed from overusing my brain? Eren wiped the blood from his nose, reflecting on the impact of the cosmic brain meditation. The rapid mental acceleration had evidently overloaded his system, a classic case of mental exhaustion. This wasn't surprising. Tales of overthinking leading to physical decline, even death, were ancient and modern alike. Looks like the technique is powerful, but it's also a double-edged sword. Even completing a single cycle of the meditation was beyond his current limits. Overusing it could wreck his body. No sooner had he cleaned up than his stomach let out a loud, rumbling protest. Starving, Eren muttered, clutching his midsection. It wasn't ordinary hunger, it felt like he hadn't eaten for 3 days. The kind of hunger that could drive a man to devour an entire cow. But why? I even ate a midnight snack earlier. The realization dawned on him. It must be the meditation, it burns through nutrients like nothing else. Unable to endure the pangs, Eren grabbed his wallet, slung on his backpack, and left the motel to find food. The streets of Chinatown were dotted with eateries, many open 24/7. Fortune smiled on him as he found a burger joint still serving. Under the astonished gaze of the staff, Eren devoured 3 massive combo meals, each featuring a double patty behemoth, fries, and a drink. Even as his belly felt ready to burst, the gnawing hunger barely abated. I can't keep eating like this, I'll explode. Suppressing the remaining hunger, Eren trudged back to the motel. The meditation's consumption rate far outstripped what ordinary eating could replenish. I need a solution. Fast. Suddenly, he remembered something. The nutritionist's recipe handbook. Maybe it has a way to boost nutrient absorption. Eagerly, Eren quickened his pace. Back at the motel, He showered, then retrieved the handbook under the warm, dim glow of the room's pinkish light. Flipping through the pages, Eren quickly realized this wasn't just any book, it was a treasure trove from a futuristic world. The nutritionists, it described, specialized in crafting dietary plans and concoctions for genetically enhanced soldiers, whose caloric needs were astronomical. The book detailed not just meal plans but recipes for dozens of nutrient-dense elixirs designed to rapidly restore energy and vitality. If the ingredients exist in this world, I might really be able to make some of these potions. Excited, Eren continued skimming the book until a sharp headache forced him to stop. Ah, the aftereffects of the meditation. I overdid it again. He set the book aside, slid it under his pillow for safekeeping, and lay down. Sleep came almost instantly. Eren's body worked overtime as he slept. His stomach processed the high-calorie meal with astonishing efficiency, breaking it down into nutrients and distributing them throughout his body. On a cellular level, his body seemed to hum with activity, each cell regenerating and strengthening, his entire system recalibrating itself for optimal performance. When Eren woke the next morning, he felt like a new man. The fatigue and headache from the meditation were gone. His mind was sharper, his focus keener, and his body brimmed with energy. Even his senses felt heightened, he could hear the rhythmic beat of his heart and the subtle flow of his breath. Is this the result of just one meditation session? He marveled at how quickly his body was adapting. If this was what one session could do, the long-term benefits would be unimaginable. Just as he was lost in thought, his phone began to ring. Incoming call. Eren picked up the device and pressed the answer button. A familiar voice chirped through the line. Eren, are you awake yet? It was none other than Pepper Potts. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 17. I'm awake, Aunt Pepper. Good, you're up. I have some good news to tell you. On the other end of the phone, Pepper sounded unusually cheerful. Even over the call, Eren could clearly hear the excitement in her voice. Good news. Could it be about my issue being resolved? Ha ha ha, clever Eren, you guessed it right. After a brief pause, Pepper continued, the culprit behind your kidnapping and that of your classmate was a gang entrenched in the Docklands. Over the past couple of days, I've leveraged Stark Industries' connections to contact a city councilman. Through his influence in the city government, we've been pressuring that gang. On top of that, Director George has been consistently causing them trouble, giving them enough of a deterrent. Just this morning, they sent someone to assure us they won't bother you two anymore. Although Eren had speculated something along these lines after leaving the Morning Star bar last night, he hadn't expected the resolution to come this quickly. After all, the Morning Star bar was the Water Ghost Gang's stronghold. Most of the Water Ghost Gang members usually gathered there. When the contamination from the forbidden object, Moonlight DJ, erupted, a significant number of the gang members were caught in the bar at the time. As a result, many of them perished due to the effects of Moonlight DJ, greatly weakening the gang's power. This sudden vulnerability exposed them to the opportunistic gaze of surrounding rival gangs. With wolves circling, the Water Ghost Gang now struggled to retain their turf, let alone make trouble for Eren. This really is good news. On the other end, Pepper breathed a sigh of relief and chuckled, yes, now you can rest easy. The school also called me earlier, so you should return to classes tomorrow. There's only half a semester left before you graduate high school. If you want to get into a good university, you don't have much time to waste. Eren was taken aback. Seriously? The Water Ghost Gang situation had just been resolved, and now he was being rushed back to school. That was something. Shaking his head helplessly, Eren replied, all right, Aunt Pepper. I'll go back to school tomorrow. Before last night, Eren had been considering giving up on school entirely to focus on quickly growing stronger. After all, this was the perilous Marvel universe, where survival depended on power. But after flipping through the nutritionist's compendium last night, Eren realized that he needed a more systematic understanding of botany and biology. Creating the serums detailed in the book required a strong foundation of theoretical knowledge, particularly to navigate the differences in nomenclature and classifications of plants and animals between this world and his original one. He needed to spend time and effort identifying cross-world equivalents before he could start producing those miraculous formulas. On the phone, Pepper seemed to pick up on Eren's reluctant tone and let out a soft laugh. After giving Eren a few final reminders, Pepper quickly hung up. As Tony Stark's personal assistant, her workload was far from light. She always had a mountain of tasks waiting for her, especially given the recent chaos surrounding Stark Industries. The fact that she had taken time out to resolve Eren's troubles showed how much effort she had put in. On the other end, Eren stared at the phone and thought. For the Water Ghost gang to fold so quickly, the incident at the Morning Star bar must have hit them hard. They were likely struggling just to stay afloat. Otherwise, they wouldn't have rushed to reassure Pepper so early in the morning. With the gang weakened and on the defensive, would this be the perfect opportunity to wipe them out for good? Following Shield's lead during the Morning Star bar incident, Eren had managed to glimpse several key pieces of information about the Water Ghost gang. The gang's leader, Onik, nicknamed the Giant Ghost, had built the gang with his own hands. Known for his brawn, cunning, and fearless personality, Onik had carved out a foothold for the gang in the docks. Onik had been absent from the Morning Star bar that night, narrowly escaping the disaster. But 3 of the gang's 4 top lieutenants had been present and were killed. With most of their leaders and rank-and-file members gone, the gang was now left with only Onik and his brother-in-law, nicknamed Seaweed. If Eren could take out these 2, the gang would collapse into chaos. The surrounding gangs, smelling blood in the water, would swoop in like sharks, tearing the Water Ghost gang apart. That would eliminate the threat entirely. The thought sent a dangerous glint through Eren's eyes. Now that their power was diminished, Onik would have no choice but to send his remaining lackeys to guard their territory, leaving himself relatively unprotected. This was the perfect time to strike. And with the Seeker origami crane in his possession, Eren could find Onik no matter where he tried to hide. With determination in his gaze, Eren muttered to himself, "If that's the case, let's put an end to this once and for all." As nightfall approached, Eren roamed the alleys of Chinatown, carefully purchasing the items he thought he might need for the night's mission. By the time darkness fully descended, Eren, now in disguise, silently slipped out of his 3-story home. Avoiding the street cameras at intersections, he followed the guidance of the Seeker origami crane in his hand. Step by step, he moved closer to Onik's location. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 18. Hell's Kitchen. The most depraved and filthy place in New York City, perhaps in the entire country, a cesspool of crime and chaos. The alleys lining the streets were littered with discarded trash, resembling makeshift garbage dumps, their stench polluting the air. Sunken and cracked roads bore scattered, empty bottles and crumpled cans that rolled listlessly in the occasional breeze. The air reeked of rotting food mixed with strange, unpleasant odors. The environment was dreadful, the streets dilapidated, and law enforcement practically non-existent. Even New York's police officers avoided the area unless absolutely necessary, their patrols hurried and perfunctory. Yet this very lawlessness made Hell's Kitchen a haven for criminals. Countless fugitives and lowlifes from across New York sought refuge here, hiding their identities and lying low in its shadows. The headquarters of the Giant Ghost Onik, the water ghost gang's leader, was a graffiti-covered red brick building nestled in the heart of this hellhole. Inside, the hulking figure of Onik, nearly 2 meters tall, guzzled beer straight from the can. With a single swig, he emptied the 500-milliliter can before crushing it into a twisted hunk of metal with his massive hand. The remaining beer dripped down his tattooed arm, pooling on the floor and accentuating the violent atmosphere of the dimly lit room. Ever since taking on a job from a mysterious benefactor, Onik had felt like everything was falling apart. The mission had failed, he hadn't secured what he was after, had lost several men, and had drawn unwanted attention. In the days since, the NYPD and city officials had been relentless, constantly breathing down his neck. As if that wasn't enough, the so-called gas leak at the Morning Star bar, his gang's base of operations, had wiped out most of the Water Ghost gang's members and leadership. The losses were devastating. He had to shell out a significant amount of money to placate the families of the deceased or risk the gang fracturing completely. To make matters worse, rival gangs had begun circling like sharks, eager to carve up the weakened Water Ghost gang's territory. When Onik had finally swallowed his pride and reached out to his powerful backer for help, he was met with a barrage of insults. Useless idiot. The memory of the scolding made Onik's blood boil. FCK. He growled, slamming his fist into the glass coffee table in front of him. The sturdy table shattered instantly, shards of glass flying everywhere and leaving cuts on his hands and face. FCK. FCK. His rage spiraled out of control. Roaring profanities, he began overturning everything within reach, smashing lamps, chairs, and anything else unlucky enough to be nearby. Outside the room, 2 gang members stationed at the door exchanged nervous glances as the sounds of destruction continued unabated. He's terrifying. How long do you think it'll take for him to calm down? One muttered, his voice trembling. No idea. Let's just hope he doesn't take his anger out on us, the other side, clearly uneasy. Suddenly, one of them sniffed the air. What's that smell? The other perked up, inhaling deeply. I don't know. But it smells kinda nice. Maybe it's perfume. Perfume. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way there's a woman in this building. Before he could finish, his eyes glazed over, and he slumped against the wall, unconscious. Alarmed, the remaining gang member rushed to his companion, only to collapse as well, succumbing to the effects of a potent hallucinogen. Moments later, a figure wearing an intricately designed clown mask slipped through a nearby window. Silent and methodical, the masked intruder slit the throats of both men before stabbing each in the heart. Eren glanced at the vial of custom hallucinogen in his pocket, impressed by its effectiveness. Not bad, he murmured. Using the same strategy, he sprayed the remaining hallucinogen under the door to Onik's room before readying his grandfather's Beretta handgun, chambering around, and waiting patiently. The hallucinogen worked quickly. Within minutes, the sounds of Onik's rampage subsided. After waiting a little longer to ensure the air was less saturated with the drug, Eren carefully opened the door just a crack. Through the gap, he saw the massive figure of Onik sprawled motionless on the couch, his bulk resembling that of a grizzly bear. Perched silently on Onik's head was the seeker origami crane, its presence confirming that this was indeed the leader of the Water Ghost gang. Activating his spirit vision, Eren confirmed that Onik was in a deep, tranquil sleep. Exhaling slowly, Eren entered the room. Without hesitation, he lunged forward and drove his blade into Onik's chest, piercing his heart. The giant didn't even have time to make a sound. In a matter of minutes, the leader of the Water Ghost gang and his 2 subordinates were dead, their lives snuffed out in utter silence. Eren let out a deep breath, finally relaxing. Before entering the building, he had used spirit vision to verify that Onik and the 2 guards were the only occupants. With them gone, there was no immediate threat left in the house. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zaelum Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 19. To be honest, Eren's infiltration had gone far more smoothly than he anticipated. The Water Ghost Gang's leader, the giant ghost, Onik, was even easier to deal with than Eren had imagined. There had been no resistance worth mentioning. They were incapacitated by the hallucinogen and died without ever knowing who their attacker was. Of course, the ease of this operation owed much to the unexpectedly effective hallucinogen spray Eren had used. Looking at the bloodied corpses, Eren mused. Killing seems to be easier than I thought. People are more fragile than I expected. Too bad the other top lieutenant of the Water Ghost Gang wasn't here. Otherwise, I could have eliminated them all at once. Despite the killing, Eren felt neither discomfort nor twisted excitement. What he experienced was a calm, matter-of-fact acceptance, as if, deep down, he believed that taking a life wasn't such a big deal. Shaking his head to dismiss such thoughts, Eren donned gloves and began searching the house. Since he had avoided using firearms and made no noise during the operation, he had ample time to clean up and secure any valuables. Half an hour later. After meticulously erasing his traces, Eren left the house with a heavy backpack, skillfully avoiding the few working cameras in Hell's Kitchen. 15 minutes later, a simple trap was triggered. The faintest spark ignited the natural gas Eren had released into the building, resulting in a deafening explosion. Boom! The raging flames consumed everything inside, leaving no evidence of what had transpired. By the time firefighters extinguished the blaze, the house was unrecognizable, and only 3 charred corpses remained to tell the story. Meanwhile, Eren had already returned to his room in Chinatown. Dumping the contents of his backpack onto his bed, he began inventorying his spoils. First were stacks upon stacks of US dollars, over 100 bundles in total, along with loose cash from the bodies. The total came to $1,308,852. In addition, there were 15 gold bars, each weighing 1 kilogram, and an assortment of jewelry and ornaments, loot Eren had retrieved from the house's safe. He wasn't entirely sure about the current gold prices, but he estimated the gold and jewelry were worth at least another couple of $1 million. Well, what do you know? With a wry smile, Eren thought of an old saying, murder and arson bring wealth, while labor leaves no bones. After hiding most of the cash, gold, and jewelry in a hidden compartment under his bed, Eren kept only a small portion of cash for emergencies. Afterward, he took a long shower and burned his clothing in the basement furnace of an old building, ensuring no trace was left behind. Finally, Eren lay down on his bed and drifted off to sleep. Elsewhere, Agent Coulson sat in his office, exhausted but satisfied. He had just finished constructing a soundproof chamber to contain the forbidden object and submitted his mission report. Just as he leaned back to relax, an agent knocked on his door to deliver news. The giant ghost Onik of the Water Ghost Gang died in a fire, the agent reported. Fire. Coulson frowned. That seems a little too convenient. Given the role Onik had played in the Morning Star Bar incident, Coulson had already marked him as a person of interest. The agent shrugged. It wasn't the fire that killed him. I checked with the NYPD, and the coroner believes Onik and the others were dead before the fire started. The corpses' positions weren't consistent with death by burning. Plenty of groups have their eyes on the Water Ghost Gang's territory. My guess. One of the gangs took him out and staged it as an accident. I see, Coulson said, nodding. Any leads on who was behind it? The agent shook his head. The fire destroyed all evidence, and the surveillance cameras in the area didn't capture anything unusual. Whoever did it must have been a professional. A professional, huh? Coulson murmured, his mind wandering. Could this have been a simple gang rivalry, or was it a case of silencing loose ends? Coulson's instincts told him there was more to this story. He couldn't shake the image of the young fortune teller who had been at the Morning Star Bar. The next morning, Eren rose early and took a taxi to Midtown High School. The original host of his body had been reclusive since his mother's death, keeping to himself and avoiding friendships. His absence over the past few days had gone unnoticed by both students and teachers. This worked to Eren's advantage. At the school gates, the administrator greeted him with concern. "Eren, are you feeling better?" Eren guessed Pepper had used his illness as an excuse to get him time off, so he nodded and responded lightly, deflecting the question. Settling into his classroom, Eren had barely sat for a few minutes when someone caught his attention. Blonde hair, a sweet smile, and strikingly beautiful features, Gwen Stacy stepped into the room, immediately drawing the gaze of nearly everyone present. She scanned the classroom briefly before locking eyes with Eren. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 20. When Gwen Stacy saw Eren, her eyes lit up. She quickly walked over to him, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush, and said, "Hi, I'm Gwen. Can I borrow a few minutes of your time, Eren?" "Of course." Eren shrugged and added, "Honestly, there aren't many people at Midtown High who don't know you." With that, Eren stood up and followed Gwen out of the classroom. Behind them, the classroom erupted into a mix of whistles, teasing, and whispers. Gwen was undeniably the goddess of Midtown High. Every move she made captured the attention of her fellow students. A group of gossiping girls immediately started speculating about the relationship between Eren and Gwen, while a few members of the basketball team glared resentfully at Eren's back, their thoughts hidden behind clenched jaws. Outside the classroom, the walk was initially quiet. Neither Eren nor Gwen spoke until they reached a secluded corner, where Gwen finally broke the silence. "Thank you for what you did that day," she said, her tone sincere. Eren scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "Honestly, I'm just glad you don't blame me." That day, trapped alone in a room together, both drugged, they had come dangerously close to crossing a line. While they hadn't taken the final step, much had already transpired between them. The memory cast an awkward tension between them. Gwen's ears flushed a delicate pink as she likely recalled the events as well. Her flushed ears were strikingly delicate and, unintentionally, captivating. "How could I blame you?" Gwen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her voice soft. "You held back in the end, didn't you? If it had been someone else, I don't think." Ahem. Spotting a teacher approaching from a distance, Eren cleared his throat loudly, cutting her off. If Gwen had continued speaking and someone overheard, it would have been unbearably awkward, for both of them. Understanding the unspoken warning, Gwen quickly fell silent. Once the teacher had passed, she changed the subject. "By the way, you were the one who called the police that day, weren't you?" "Yeah." Eren nodded. "There was no reason to deny it. Both of us had been drugged, and you were barely coherent. I had to run out on my own to get help." "I understand. If you had stayed to drag me along, neither of us would have gotten out," Gwen interrupted, her voice firm. "My dad said it was because you barricaded the door that they had enough time to take down those criminals. You saved us." Eren chuckled lightly, saying nothing. It wasn't hard to see why Gwen was so well liked at school. She was not only beautiful and intelligent but also perceptive and kind. Gwen suddenly seemed to recall something, her expression brightening. "Oh, by the way, my mom wanted to thank you for saving me. She's invited you to dinner at our house tomorrow evening. You won't say no, will you?" Eren blinked, startled. First, he had seen Gwen in ways no one else had. Now, he was being invited to her house for dinner. Was this some kind of meet the in-laws scenario? Shaking his head, Eren replied, "That's really not necessary. I didn't do much to help." Before he could finish, Gwen raised a finger and pressed it against his lips. "You're not allowed to refuse. I already promised my mom, and you wouldn't want me to go back on my word, would you?" The warmth of her finger lingered on his lips, and without thinking, Eren lightly licked his lips. Gwen's reaction was immediate. She pulled her hand back as if shocked, her face glowing red. The blush spread across her cheeks, painting her porcelain skin with an enchanting hue. Before the moment could grow more awkward, the school bell rang, signaling the start of class. "I wrote the address on this card. If you don't come tomorrow, you're dead." Advantage of the distraction, Gwen shoved a card into Eren's hand before dashing off in a flustered hurry, leaving him no chance to refuse. Well. Before Eren could process what had just happened, a voice sounded behind him. "She's already gone. Staring won't change that. You should hurry to class before your teacher starts docking your grades." Turning around, Eren saw the school administrator he had encountered earlier at the gates. The older man's plump face bore a knowing smile, and there was a glint of nostalgia in his eyes, as if the scene had reminded him of some fond memory from his youth. Eren didn't bother explaining. With an awkward smile, he nodded and headed back to class. Back in the classroom, Eren returned to find his math teacher already waiting. Fortunately, the teacher didn't make things difficult for him. After nodding in acknowledgement, the teacher allowed Eren to take his seat. Barely seated, Eren felt an elbow nudge his arm. Turning, he saw a round-faced, cheerful classmate leaning in with an eager expression. "Eren, you sly dog. Since when did you know Gwen? And why didn't you tell me?" The boy, Doug, was one of Eren's few acquaintances at school. A fellow Chinatown native and an Asian American like Eren, Doug was one of the few classmates Eren could have casual conversations with. But Doug's nosiness and loose tongue made him someone Eren preferred not to confide in too much. "You're overthinking it," Eren replied, keeping his voice level. "I was out sick for a few days, remember? Gwen's a student assistant, so she was just checking up on me to see if I needed any help." Eren intentionally spoke loud enough for nearby eavesdroppers to hear. His words served as a subtle warning to the curious students around him. He had no interest in becoming the center of gossip. After all, Eren's reason for attending school was to learn, not to waste time on meaningless drama. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 21. People always like hearing what they want to hear, regardless of age. Sure enough. When Eren spoke, the students eavesdropping nearby visibly relaxed, their expressions shifting to an, "ah, that makes sense," kind of look. Compared to the gossip about Eren and Gwen earlier, they were more inclined to believe the explanation he just gave. However, the chubby Doug rolled his eyes and deliberately said in Mandarin, "Who are you trying to fool? If that's all there is to it, why did you two need to step out and talk alone?" Both their families had been Chinese for 3 generations. Since childhood, they were taught Mandarin by their elders, so they sometimes used it to communicate in school when discussing things they didn't want others to overhear. Mandarin, renowned for its difficulty, was rarely spoken by anyone other than Chinese. At Midtown High, there weren't many who understood it. Using Mandarin ensured they wouldn't be overheard. Eren rolled his eyes and replied softly, "That's the truth. Believe it or not." "Hey." Doug, annoyed by Eren's response, raised his voice unconsciously. Just as he was about to say more, he caught the stern gaze of the math teacher. Though old, the math teacher was far from senile. He wasn't about to let his class be disrupted so blatantly. Doug immediately deflated like a balloon with a hole in it, shrinking back into his seat. The rest of the class, also wary of the teacher's wrath, fell silent. The room became eerily quiet. Satisfied with the restored order, the math teacher cleared his throat. He announced that, as graduating students, the school would be conducting a mock exam next week to assess everyone's knowledge level. The math exam would be held on Wednesday morning. The teacher didn't want his class to lag behind others, so he planned to use the upcoming sessions to review past lessons thoroughly. He urged everyone to pay close attention. As soon as he finished, the classroom erupted again. The top students looked confident and unperturbed. The struggling students, on the other hand, groaned as if mourning a loss. Eren's earlier smile also wavered upon hearing the announcement. Seriously? First day back at school, and you're telling me there's going to be an exam? Even though Eren had inherited the memories of this body, they were incomplete. Moreover, the original Eren wasn't exactly a top student. His grades usually hovered around the middle to lower ranks of the class. Now it was his turn, with incomplete memories, to face an exam. Success seemed unlikely. The math teacher, of course, didn't care about Eren's plight. He picked up a piece of chalk and began scribbling formulas on the board, explaining the key concepts he had previously taught. As the teacher spoke, Eren's dual memories began to merge, rapidly enhancing his grasp of mathematical knowledge. Even concepts the original Eren had forgotten, or never mastered, were now quickly absorbed and retained. After consuming the seer potion, Eren's memory and learning abilities had already reached extraordinary levels. The cosmic brain meditation technique he had practiced further boosted his mental acuity, enhancing his ability to learn and retain information. Now, Eren's sharp mind devoured every piece of knowledge, turning it into something he could use. Midtown High was a prestigious school, even among elite institutions in New York and across the country. The teaching staff was top-notch. In just one class, Eren felt his mathematical skills improve noticeably. This was partly due to his 2 lives' worth of knowledge merging, but also thanks to the teacher's guidance. After the math class, it was time for physics, chemistry, and other subjects. Each session further solidified Eren's understanding, significantly boosting his overall knowledge. Though he still couldn't compare to the academic stars of his grade, he was no longer at the bottom of the class. At 3 p.m., Eren retrieved his books from his locker, preparing to attend his Advanced Placement (AP) course. AP courses allowed students to earn college credits in advance, but participation was optional and left to the student's discretion. However, for anyone aiming to get into a top-tier university, AP course performance was a must. Federal high schools typically divided their courses into 3 difficulty levels. Basic difficulty, regular courses that were barely enough to earn a high school diploma. Intermediate difficulty, honor courses, sufficient to secure admission to 2nd or 3rd tier universities. Advanced difficulty, AP courses, requiring a minimum of 5 subjects and an average score of 5 for admission into top universities. In the US, college preparation began the moment you entered high school. As a student at Midtown High, Eren was no exception. With his current plans, he intended to add a few more AP courses to his schedule beyond what the original Eren had chosen. For most people, taking on several new AP courses in one semester and scoring high on the exams was a daunting task. But with his enhanced memory and learning ability, Eren believed it wouldn't be too difficult. Just as Eren was about to leave with his books, he unexpectedly bumped into Gwen, who was carrying a stack of textbooks. Eren. Yeah, Gwen, what are you doing here? Heading to my AP class, Gwen said, raising her textbooks slightly. She glanced at the book Eren was holding and asked, "You too?" Eren looked at his book and realized it was the same AP calculus textbook Gwen had. What a coincidence. I didn't expect us to pick the same course. Gwen rolled her eyes playfully. Calculus is a required course for college. It's not surprising that many students choose it. Eren smiled. Fair point. But there's only one AP calculus class this afternoon. I didn't realize we were in the same class. How did I not notice before? Gwen wondered. Eren chuckled without answering. After all, the only one who hadn't noticed was Gwen. The original Eren had been so inconspicuous in school that he was practically invisible. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 22. Eren had been secretly glancing at Gwen during every AP class they shared. But Gwen had never noticed. The reason for Eren's momentary surprise earlier was simply because he hadn't recalled this particular detail right away. After all, in Eren's view, the original body's naive little crush had already ended before it even began. As for the memories tied to that crush, Eren wasn't interested in revisiting them. Shall we go together? Gwen raised the textbook in her hand, inviting him. The accidental physical contact earlier seemed to have elevated Eren's position in Gwen's mind, compelling her to want to know him better. Eren shrugged. Sure, let's go together. I have something I wanted to talk to you about anyway. Gwen turned to face him, smiling. As long as it's not about canceling tomorrow night. But even if you do, I'll pretend I didn't hear it. She added a playful wink. This. The difficulty of the AP Calculus course was not as daunting as Eren had expected. It was comparable to the calculus he had studied in his previous life. One class session was enough for Eren, now refreshed by his past life memories, to make remarkable progress in his understanding of calculus. What amazed him even more, though, was Gwen. She seemed to find the university-level calculus course too elementary. Throughout the class, she spent most of her time engrossed in reading advanced mathematics papers. If it weren't for the dismissal bell, Eren suspected Gwen could have buried herself in those books at school until nightfall. After putting his AP Calculus textbook into his locker, Eren retrieved his backpack and locked the door, ready to head home. Gwen, seeing him grab his bag, asked curiously, "You're not in any clubs?" Since the next day was the weekend, Friday afternoons were prime time for most clubs to gather and hold activities. Eren shrugged. I was in one, but today I need to leave early. Gwen nodded and smiled. Got it. I won't walk you out, then. I've got a chemistry lab group meeting. All right, Eren replied, then added, see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. After saying goodbye to Gwen, Eren hadn't even made it to the school gates before a chubby hand wrapped tightly around his neck from behind. Gotcha, Eren. I knew there was something going on between you and Gwen. Deny it all you want, but I saw it with my own eyes. Now spill the beans. The culprit was none other than the chubby Doug, whose nickname was Big Dog. Doug's name sounded similar to the word dog, so his nickname stuck ever since someone first called him that. Eren pried off the pudgy arm around his neck and retorted, spill what? Gwen and I share the same AP class, you know that. Then, rubbing his slightly sore neck, he added, also, Big Dog, you really need to lose some weight. If you don't, you won't even be able to see your neck anymore. Doug's face turned green as soon as Eren mentioned his weight, completely forgetting about the gossip he was so fixated on earlier. He glared at Eren. I've told you before, you can call me by my nickname, but don't call me fat. I've said it 100 times, it's not fat, it's muscle. Feel my biceps if you don't believe me. Rock solid. Yeah, right, Eren sneered, rolling his eyes at Doug's soft, fluffy arms. He left Doug to his own delusions. Hey, what's with that look? I'm telling you. Before the chubby boy could finish defending himself, Eren swung his backpack over his shoulder and strode towards the school gates. Doug hurriedly followed, panting heavily as he tried to keep up. But no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't catch up to Eren, who eventually flagged down a taxi and drove off. Gasping for breath, Doug watched in disbelief as the cab sped away. A taxi. How extravagant. Has Eren struck it rich or something? Normally, unless it was for a club activity, Eren would take the bus home with Doug. After all, a taxi ride from school to Chinatown wasn't cheap. For them, it was better to save that money for games or a better controller. Getting out of the cab, Eren unlocked the front door of his home. Sure enough, Pepper Potts, dressed sharply in professional attire, was sitting on the couch. On the table in front of her was an extra-large pizza box, a box of crispy fried chicken, and 2 drinks. Eren had rushed home today because Pepper had told him earlier she would be visiting. Eren is back. I brought you a supreme pizza set from Crown Pizza and your favorite fried chicken. Oh, and Coke too, Pepper greeted him warmly. Although there was a hint of worry in her expression, she forced a smile and motioned for Eren to sit down. She then opened the boxes of pizza and chicken. Crown Pizza was a famous New York pizzeria, with long lines every day. Getting their pizza wasn't easy. The moment the box was opened, the rich aroma of the supreme pizza wafted through the air. Compared to that, the smell of the fried chicken seemed less enticing. Eren didn't immediately go for the fragrant pizza or the golden, crispy chicken. Instead, he grabbed a drink and took a sip. Coke. Aunt Pepper, you know me so well. You knew I'd prefer Coke over the juice that comes with the pizza set. Pepper chuckled. I actually think their freshly squeezed juice is pretty good. You should try it sometime. A little variety wouldn't hurt. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 23. Hey, Aunt Pepper, that's because you don't understand the joy of Coke. Pepper shook her head and said, all right, enough joking around. The pizza and fried chicken are still hot. Let's eat before they get cold in this weather. As she spoke, Pepper picked the meatiest slice of pizza from the box and handed it to Eren. Thanks, Aunt Pepper. Without hesitation, Eren took the pizza and began devouring it. Since practicing the cosmic brain meditation, Eren's appetite had grown significantly. He was eating more and feeling hungry faster. Whether it was due to the meditation consuming a lot of energy or his body now requiring more nutrients to sustain itself, Eren couldn't be sure. By the time the meal was over, Pepper had only eaten 1 slice of pizza and drank a cup of juice. The rest of the pizza and all the fried chicken had gone into Eren's stomach. Watching him eat like a ravenous wolf startled Pepper. She was almost worried something was wrong with his body. Aunt Pepper, don't worry. I've been training lately, so I'm burning a lot more energy and eating more as a result. Training? Yeah. Last time, I was kidnapped so easily, partly because I was physically too weak. Even if I couldn't fight back, it wouldn't have been so easy for them to capture me if I were stronger. Since escaping, I've been training to build up my stamina. My appetite has grown along with it. I see. Pepper let out a sigh of relief after Eren's explanation. Intense physical training leading to a bigger appetite wasn't unusual, and as a growing boy, getting stronger was never a bad thing. After dinner, they began chatting leisurely. Oh, right, Pepper said, I got a call from Chief George this afternoon. He said the leader of the Water Ghost gang died last night, and the last remaining boss, that guy named Seagrass, was arrested for murder. You can finally relax and stop worrying. Eren froze for a moment. So the leader, Seagrass, was captured by the NYPD. No wonder I didn't find him when I wiped out the Water Ghost gang. Messing with the daughter of a New York police chief. Eren had no doubt that Seagrass was finished. Plus, as the second in command of a gang, it was impossible that his record was clean. This time, the NYPD wouldn't let him go easily. Eren grinned. Well, karma sure does work fast. Looks like I can finally get a good night's sleep. Pepper smiled. You definitely need it, especially since you'll be at Gwen's house tomorrow night. You wouldn't want to look tired. Wait, Aunt Pepper, how do you know about that? Pepper chuckled. I know Gwen's mom, Helen. She invited me too. But Stark Industries is a mess right now, so I can't make it. You're on your own, kiddo. Then, with a teasing glint in her eyes, she added, maybe it's for the best. You might just charm your way into Gwen's heart without me around. Oh, so that's how it is. Ignoring Pepper's teasing, Eren recalled the troubled look on her face when he first entered. Aunt Pepper, is something wrong with Stark Industries? Is that what's been bothering you? Pepper hesitated for a moment, then sighed. You noticed, huh? Of course. Well, I won't hide it from you. Tony's gone missing. Stark Industries is in chaos, and even the military keeps sending people over for updates. As Tony's personal assistant, I have to handle all of it. On top of that, there's a flood of reporters. These past few days have been overwhelming. Perhaps it was because she needed someone to confide in, or maybe she genuinely saw Eren as family, but Pepper began venting her frustrations to him. Apart from the company issues, she had also been worried about Eren's recent troubles, though she chose not to mention that part to him. Tony. You mean the famous billionaire playboy Tony Stark? When did he go missing? Pepper looked surprised. You didn't know? The news has been all over this for days. Eren shrugged. Aunt Pepper, you know why. After that incident, I haven't watched the news at all. Oh, my. I'm so sorry, Eren. I forgot about that. Pepper immediately pulled Eren into a tight hug, guilt written all over her face. After a while, she finally said, now that I think about it, Tony went missing on the same day you were kidnapped. What? The same day? Pepper didn't realize the storm her words had stirred in Eren's mind. As Marvel's chosen one, Tony Stark's disappearance marked the beginning of the extraordinary world of the Marvel Universe, the turning point for everything. The day Tony Stark went missing was the same day Eren arrived in this world. Was it purely coincidence, or was there some unknown connection? Suppressing his shock and doubt, Eren replied, what a coincidence, huh? Coincidence, my foot. Pepper rolled her eyes. Do you know how much I've been worrying about you too? Your issue is resolved now, but there's still no news about Tony. As she spoke, her eyes betrayed a deep-seated worry she couldn't hide. Don't worry, Aunt Pepper, Eren comforted her. Tony Stark is a genius. He'll be fine. But the military found several wrecked vehicles and soldiers' bodies at the site where he went missing. They suspect it was a terrorist attack. Pepper's voice trembled, as if she couldn't bear to think about the worst-case scenario. Seeing this, Eren offered another perspective. Aunt Pepper, think about it this way. If Tony Stark were really in trouble, wouldn't the terrorist group responsible have bragged about it by now? No group has claimed responsibility, which could mean Tony is still alive and well. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 6 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Zaelum. Download app now. Chapter 24. If fate in this world was still on track, Eren remembered that Tony should currently be swinging a hammer in some cave. The conditions were harsh, but at least his life wasn't in immediate danger. Hearing Eren's words, Pepper forced a faint smile. I hope so. Seeing the gloom in Pepper's eyes, Eren sighed inwardly. Fine. For Aunt Pepper's sake, I'll help out. Having made up his mind, Eren said, Aunt Pepper, if you really want to find your boss, Tony Stark, I might be able to help. Pepper was momentarily stunned before she smiled and ruffled Eren's hair. It's sweet of you to offer, but finding Tony is something for the police and military to handle. Clearly, Pepper didn't believe Eren could help with such a major issue. Stark Industries and the federal military, two massive entities, had been searching for Tony for so long without success. What could a high schooler like Eren possibly do? Aunt Pepper, you don't believe me. Eren wasn't foolish. Pepper's patronizing tone was obvious. Pepper smiled but said nothing, her attitude crystal clear. Well, I believe him. At that moment, a magnetic, calm voice suddenly interrupted their conversation. Startled, Pepper immediately stood up and placed herself protectively in front of Eren, glaring at the middle-aged man who had entered uninvited. Sir, this is private property. Please leave. The intruder, Coulson, quickly raised his hands, one holding his identification and the other a briefcase, to show he meant no harm. He explained hastily, please don't be alarmed. My name is Phil Coulson, an agent with the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division. Eren can vouch for me. Pepper frowned, not recognizing the lengthy name, but she did catch the word, agent. Keeping a safe distance, she examined Coulson's ID carefully, then turned to Eren with a questioning look. He's indeed an agent from that long-named organization, Eren confirmed flatly, then turned to Coulson with a cold expression. But I don't recall inviting you into my home, Agent Coulson. Are you planning to trespass, or does your agency have the authority to override federal law? Don't misunderstand, Coulson said quickly. The door was unlocked, and I overheard your conversation, so I... He paused mid-sentence, then added apologetically, all right, my bad. I should have knocked first. But since I came bearing money, maybe you can let it slide this time. He raised the briefcase in his hand with a sheepish smile. Money. Pepper frowned in confusion. Eren, however, seemed to catch on. Is this about the reward for the last mission? Your strategic something works fast, huh? It's the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, Coulson corrected with mild exasperation, then added proudly, our efficiency is top-notch, unlike some bloated organizations. With that, he unzipped the briefcase, revealing stacks of neatly arranged cash. The sight of the money made Eren's eyes light up. All right, since you came all this way to deliver money, I'll let it slide this time. But if you barge in uninvited again, I'll hire a lawyer to sue your agency. Eren casually took the briefcase from Coulson's hand. As he did, Coulson scratched his head awkwardly. The briefcase is my personal property. Once you take the cash and tax receipt, could you return it to me? Eren rolled his eyes but obliged, pulling out $100,000 in cash and a tax receipt with his name on it before tossing the briefcase back to Coulson. Thanks, Coulson said as he caught the briefcase and zipped it up. Meanwhile, Pepper's expression turned grim as she stared at the stacks of cash on the table. Eren, don't you think you owe me an explanation for this? She was both worried and scared. $100,000 was no small sum. Even for someone like Pepper, who had been working for years, saving up that much would take over a month. For a high schooler like Eren, why would this mysterious agency hand him so much money? The last thing Pepper wanted was to hear that Eren had joined some secretive government agency, let alone one as dangerous as this. Seeing Pepper's stern expression, Eren knew she had misunderstood. He quickly explained, it's like this, Aunt Pepper. I have some special abilities. During one of Agent Coulson's missions, I happened to help out, and this is my reward. I wasn't kidding earlier when I said I could help you find your boss. That's also related to my abilities. Coulson chimed in, that's right. Eren does possess extraordinary talents. I can vouch for that. When I heard him say he could find Tony Stark, I got a little too excited and came in without knocking. Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark, was one of the founders of Coulson's organization. Because of that connection, Coupled with Tony's extraordinary genius, he had always been a high-priority figure for the